skin in those games.
Yeah, I live and die with baseball. I learned not to miss council. That's right.
Oh, Luke,
Yes, I know.
you owe me a beer.
I know. I know.
Good evening, everyone. It's October 5th, 2021. Welcome to the City of Oneonta meeting of the Common Council. Carrie, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Herzling,
Here?
Councilmember Murphy,
Here.
Councilmember Davies,
Here.
Councilmember Risberger,
Here.
Councilmember Lepari Shu,
Here.
Councilmember Carson,
Here.
Councilmember Harrington,
Present.
Councilmember Rafter,
Present.
Councilmember Drummond.
Here.
Okay, the gang's all here, so please rise and join us in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands,
one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all for being here. We're going to start, we have no public hearing scheduled, so we'll start with an opportunity for petitioners. If anybody is here to address the council, please raise your hand. You can keep your remarks relatively brief. It'd be appreciated, and identify yourself, name and address. Julie Dostal.
It's been a long time since I've done this, so I feel like I'm out of practice. So hi there, I'm Julie Dostal. I'm the Executive Director of the Lead Council on Alcoholism and Addictions, and I have a brief statement to share with you. Communities around the state are being asked to make a huge decision regarding the sale and commercialization of cannabis. They have been asked to make this decision without being given access to complete information. With the December 31st deadline approaching, a growing number of communities around the state have made a decision to simply press the pause button. They have voted to opt out at least until the regulations related to the sale, commercialization, and consumption of marijuana come out. Pausing on the opt-in gives communities the opportunity to observe and provide feedback while regulations are developed. And once the regulations are complete, the decision to opt in is still available. However, opting in is a permanent decision. And as an aside, in the states that currently have the option to opt out, between 60 and 80% of all municipalities took that option. So the questions that we don't have the full answer to are things such as, but not limited to, how will marijuana be advertised? Will those advertisements be visible to children? What, if any, are the limits on potency? Will highly potent products that are potentially attractive to children, such as gummies, lollipops, and cookies, be permitted? What measures will be put into place to assist communities if the costs related to the harms of cannabis exceed the income of sales? What kind of accountability and enforcement mechanism will be in place for dispensaries and/or consumption sites? The laws related to medical use became more permissive as time went on. And what options will a municipality have if the adult use laws become more permissive over time? So you all know me, and I'm sure you know that I have a pretty firm opinion about commercialized cannabis, and I'm not here to relitigate that. In my role with LEAD, it is my desire to increase protection in my community as much as is possible from the harms that will come with this law. Harms at a level we have never seen before due to the potency created by a commercialized product. And if you should ever want to know the full picture of today's cannabis, I'm available to you always. And I'm available to come for more discussion if that is ever something that the council desires. And on a slightly different note, let me end with this. I have to read it or I'll get choked up. I appreciate you and the service to this community that you all do to make Oneonta a thriving small city with a great big heart. And after all that we've been through in the last 18 months, I hope that you hear that loudly and often. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. And let me say that I think I can speak for all of us. We all appreciate all that you do and have done for many years for this community. So thank you. Anybody else? Daniel?
Yeah.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Daniel Dreyer. I live in the 8th Ward on Walnut Street. I'm here to speak because appointing Chris Witzenberg to the position of police chief is on the consent agenda. Last summer, I volunteered for subcommittee 2, the Community Advisory Board, which Luke Murphy ran. And in the course of that work, I had several opportunities to interact with acting chief Chris Witzenberg. And although Chris and I disagree on many subjects, I came away with the firm conviction that he's incredibly dedicated to the safety and well-being of this community and is willing to work quite hard to that end. I can't imagine that we would find a police chief who's more committed to this community than he is. I do have one area of concern, which I originally tried to resolve privately, and with him up for this position, I feel a need to make more public. As a participant in subcommittee 2, I was asked to attend a March 17th, 2021 meeting with Deanna Charles, Luke Murphy, Katie Botcher, and acting chief Witzenberg. The purpose of the meeting was to explain the subcommittee's recommendation to acting chief Witzenberg. I took notes on the meeting, wrote them up, and shared them all with all in attendance, and I have a copy with me. I'm happy to share if anyone's interested. During that meeting, Chris made 2 statements I found disturbing that I feel I need to share with you all. I'd like to read from a letter I sent to Mayor Herzig following the meeting. During our meeting Wednesday, the acting chief very explicitly described how OPB would disregard or circumvent laws prohibiting pretext stops or warrior training if Common Council passed them. Specifically, he said he would find training with a different name and functionally identical content to warrior training, and that they would continue doing pretext stops under a different name if Common Council prohibits those practices. This is obviously unacceptable and shows that existing oversight processes are deeply insufficient, as well as require an immediate corrective action. His basic response to many of our other recommendations was that we need to trust OPB when it comes to force, use of force, drug policing strategy, use of SRT, training priorities, etc. I don't know how to trust a department that is willing to openly circumvent the will of local elected officials. As a private citizen on an official oversight function, I feel like I'm in a very tough position to be aware of this blatant misconduct. My expectation is that these statements, corrective actions taken, and concrete plans for additional oversight will be documented in the official public report that is submitted to Albany. End quote. I promise I'll wrap up quickly. The specific recommendations here are beside the point. I'm not relating the whole cab question. My concern is that in 2 occasions on this meeting, Chris's go-to response is that he would circumvent the will of this body if he felt it necessary. And I do genuinely feel that he's motivated by a desire to keep the community safe. I think he's trying to do right in saying that he would ignore these things. I think he's got the right feelings in his heart. But we live in a society of law. It's important that when you make laws and policies, that everyone working for this city respect them, even if they don't agree with them. And I'm conflicted in bringing it up because I have seen Chris's deep commitment to doing right by this community. I actually do think he is the right person for this job. And this disturbs me. I would like to ask all of your help in setting that expectation with him, because he's one of the good guys. He's good at his job. He believes in the community. I would like to encourage Common Council to select Chris Witzenberg to lead OPB, but to delay the selection until after greater oversight has been established. And I encourage each of you on council to personally talk with Chris prior to selecting him as chief and establish to your own satisfaction that he will respect laws and policies you pass on this council. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Daniel, and thank you again for, I know you put a lot of time and effort into the creation of the final report on police reform. which hopefully the implementation plan is adopted tonight.
You have one online.
Oh. First. Are you letting them in,
I'm admitting her now.
Jennifer?
There she is. You're muted, Jennifer.
The
There you
second
go.
time it's been said.
And she disconnected. We'll give her a moment to reconnect.
For 3 minutes.
In front of you, however, there is a document that she submitted, the cover sheet of which is local law number 4-22, 2021. Yeah, that she had asked be provided.
She's back, I can't tell.
Yeah, I just admitted her. It says she's joining.
Hello, Jennifer, can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear me?
We cannot hear you. You must be muted. She's not muted, so there's another, we're having problems with the sound.
You can hear us, Jennifer? There's sound. Jennifer?
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. It
Okay,
was.
so-
All right, so I've already lost, what, 3 minutes in my time?
You have 20 seconds left, so talk fast.
Right. Well, I'm actually here to follow up with what Julie Dostal just spoke about the new marijuana law. I'm here representing Tobacco-Free Communities, Delaware, Otsego, Schoharie, and we're located on Main Street in Oneonta. What I wanted to talk about is that, I have my notes here. So the new marijuana law says cannabis cannot be smoked or vaped where smoking and vaping are already prohibited by the New York State Clean Indoor Air Act. However, the new law does not prohibit the smoking or vaping of marijuana in outdoor spaces, even those that currently have a local municipal tobacco-free outdoor policy, like the city of Oneonta. The city of Oneonta's current tobacco-free outdoors policy applies to its parks and recreational areas, but not to all municipal grounds, and it does not include cannabis as a prohibited substance. So I'm here to just talk about, we're going to different municipalities to let them know about that caveat in the law. And for municipalities who have not yet created a tobacco-free outdoors policy or who need to update it to include banning cannabis, if that's what you all decide, to let you know that would have to happen if you wanted to prohibit smoking and vaping marijuana in municipal grounds. I sent a sample comprehensive policy that the town of Carroll just adopted in August, and it's going to go into effect, I think, in about a week. And they basically put in their policy the banning of smoking and vaping, really, of all substances, including like herbal cigarettes and things like that. So I think it's a good policy because it really details their purposes and why they want to ban those substances from use in public outdoor spaces. So a big part of that is for tobacco-free outdoor policies, for instance, it's mainly about protecting residents of the municipality from the harmful effects of exposure to secondhand smoke and electronic cigarette aerosol emissions, which is especially important for children and adults with asthma or other chronic conditions. Just a reminder that the US Surgeon General ruled a while ago that there's no safe level of exposure to secondhand smoke. And secondhand cannabis smoke and aerosols contain harmful chemicals as well, similar to those in tobacco smoke. Unlike many other health issues, one person's choice to use tobacco or cannabis can directly affect the health of others. And while tobacco-free outdoors policies are not about getting smokers to quit, they do help support the efforts of tobacco users who want to quit, and nearly 70% of smokers say they want to quit. The tobacco-free outdoor policies also help prevent young people from becoming tobacco users by lessening their exposure to its use. And since 90% of current adult smokers began smoking before the age of 18, it's important to keep young people from starting. That is the key to decreasing the smoking rate. Another piece of data that I just learned about is that smoking increases COVID-19 hospitalization rate by up to 80%, according to data from the United Kingdom. So that's obviously another public health situation that smoking can make much worse. And it's important to have smoke-free policies that prohibit the smoking and vaping of cannabis, because if both aren't in that policy, then whatever's not banned can undermine the other one. And it's also much more hard to enforce, obviously, especially with vaping. And this is just also a reminder that, tobacco has been normalized for so long, and because nationwide the smoking rate has gone down significantly, which is wonderful, and especially in New York State. The only thing is we don't think of tobacco use as a big deal because of that. But in 2020, more than 480,000 people died from tobacco-related causes. And just to put that in some sort of perspective, that number is more than those who die from suicide, murder, AIDS, alcohol use, illegal drug use, and motor vehicle crashes combined. It is the #1 cause of preventative deaths in the nation. The other benefits are that it reduces tobacco-free outdoor policies, reduce cigarette and e-cigarette litter, which are highly toxic and dangerous to children, wildlife, and the environment. They, of course, save local governments a lot of money in terms of healthcare costs, maintenance, and cleaning costs. And they just communicate a positive message that in those outdoor recreational areas, in those public spaces, smoking and vaping are not compatible with an active, healthy lifestyle. And just to give you a few current facts about Otsego County, the most current, the current data on the adult smoking rate here is 16.5%. And that is still above the statewide rate of 12.8%. And the Siena College Research Institute did a survey a year ago and found that 68% of Otsego County residents support their municipalities having tobacco-free outdoor policies. And that includes like grounds surrounding municipal buildings and things like that. So, my organization is here to provide free technical support and signage once a municipality either adopts a tobacco-free outdoor policy or updates it or expands it, amends it in some way. So that's it.
Thank you, Jennifer.
You're welcome. Thanks, everyone.
Anybody else here to address the council?
Mike Mancini, retired captain, only on fire. I'd like to voice my support for the promotion of Lieutenant Witzenberg to chief tonight. You should go forth with that without a single moment of reservation. I've worked with Chris for the last 25 years, albeit across the hallway. I have seen Chris grow into all the positions that he has taken, and has done it very well. And along every one of those years, he has never once wavered on his officer safety for himself, his other officers, and most importantly, most recently, in my 6-month tenure as interim chief of the fire department, I work hand in hand with Chris as a department head, and we work well together. Great ideas, great things, and he definitely wants to move the department forward, and he will be an asset as he already has been for the last 20-some years. So please, very much go forward without any reservation.
Thank you, Mike. Anybody else? With that, we will close the petitioners section of our agenda. We'll move on to Dr. Jorgensen, City Health Officer report.
And thank you, Julie, on behalf of me.
Thank you.
And hi, everybody. This will be brief. I use slides because I can't always remember all the numbers, and then I'm here to answer any questions. So as you may know, in the world, cases are coming down, and this is the United States specific epidemiologic curve. You can see numbers are coming down in terms of cases as well as hospitalizations and deaths. And if you can see there, vaccination rates are slightly increasing. Next slide. However, in New York State, we've sort of reached a plateau. We're still seeing about 5,000 new cases a day, and deaths, while low, have also plateaued. Here in Otsego County, today, October 5th, 20 cases were reported. The 2 previous days, they were above 20, and that actually represents a little bit of an uptick, as well as 1 new hospitalization. Since mid-August, there have been 5 deaths. We are still at a level of high transmission, and in fact, the CDC's definition of our number went up a little today from what it was yesterday. Next slide. The number of active cases in the county, you can see, is starting to trend up. It's too soon to tell if it will be a maintained trend, but I think something of a little concern. It is not coming from the college students. As of today, there are 3 active cases at SUNY and 2 at Hartwick. Heidi tells me there's no significant clusters, but there are many school-age children who are testing positive. There were almost 500 cases in September in the county. We do not yet have the breakdown of how many of those were vaccinated. We do know in Delaware and Shenango counties who've reported out their vaccinated versus unvaccinated numbers, about a quarter of those people testing positive are vaccinated. That being said, the great proportion of people severely ill and hospitalized are the unvaccinated. Next slide. And here's some more local information. And I don't know if you want to speak to this, Greg. I thought this was concerning. Our most recent wastewater data from the 30th shows a big uptick. And you can see how in general, our wastewater has reflected trends in terms of new cases in the county. So I think it's just, I'm sorry to be the bringer of continued concern, but that's, if any message I want to tell you is that I think we still need to be concerned about presence of COVID-19 in our community. Next slide. This is interesting. This is all from the New York State Department of Health website. They've done a lot of analysis of the whole breakthrough of, I think what none of us anticipated is the number of cases that were going to be in already vaccinated people. And these curves just sort of show you beginning in May up through just September, the bottom line are the cases per 100,000 of those people being those vaccinated persons. So you see how that number is trending up, nowhere near as much as a blue line, which is unvaccinated. But to put together, then you see the black line, which shows the estimated efficacy of the vaccines, which is slowly declining. Next slide. But bottom line overall, this is from this week's White House press report, and this data is from Seattle. People who are not fully vaccinated are 8 times more likely to test positive. People who are not fully vaccinated are 41 times more likely to be hospitalized. And people who are not fully vaccinated are 57 times more likely to die of COVID. So vaccination is still our best and strongest tool to get the numbers trending back downward, prevent individuals from becoming hospitalized and dying, and also keep our community safer. Next slide. Here's just another, this is from the New York Times a few days ago, and this just shows you, again, the relationship between deaths and rates of vaccination in different states. So in those states with the highest rate of death per 100,000 residents are the ones with lower vaccination rates. And then we are down, well, we're kind of almost to New England, but those states with the highest vaccination rates have a lower death rate. So it's just more data to support that vaccination is what we need to get us there. Next slide. A whole lot of new things have come up, and I'm happy to answer questions. I just want to briefly talk about boosters because there was a bit of back and forth between the FDA and the CDC in terms of who would be actually eligible. This is from the New York State Department of Health website, and I think it has the clearest summary. The CDC eventually has stated that people 65 years of older or residents in long-term care settings should receive a booster. Now, this booster is the only one that's been approved now is Pfizer, at least 6 months after the primary series. Those younger New Yorkers age 50, and this is the whole country, this just happens to be taken from the New York State site. 50 to 65 with underlying medical conditions should also get a booster. Now, other categories of individuals, which are large sections of our communities, may get a booster, and that includes anyone between 18 and 49 with an underlying medical condition. You may wonder, why isn't that 16? Because Pfizer is approved for those 16. That's mostly because the studies showing the efficacy and safety of the Pfizer vaccine, there weren't enough numbers in that 16 to 18 cohort where some of the safety issues have come up. So that's why it's 18 plus. And then also people who are occupationally at risk. So that's me and you and a whole bunch of other people may get the booster. So I've been a little worried whether the community need will be met. This Friday, the county does have their first clinic where they will be giving booster Pfizer shots. Heidi told me today all 70 slots are full, but she may open some others. Local pharmacies are offering booster shots, and within the Bassett Healthcare Network, while they will not be sponsoring community clinics, their plan is to have primary care provider offices offer the boosters. Both Moderna and, as of today, J&J have asked for emergency use authorization for booster shots, and hopefully that will they will be available within a few weeks, as will perhaps vaccines for our younger people ages 5 to 11. So I think I'll leave it at that unless there are questions.
Luke?
Luke?
Yeah, this is just a quick two-part question. It might be more for the county, but is there a reason why Chenango and Delaware have access to information that Otsego doesn't? And if just before that one, is there anything the council can do to advocate on their behalf? Because it sounds like this is important information that we aren't privy to.
Yeah, and that is a very good point. When you go to the Daily Star, in Chenango and Delaware tell us the percent of vaccinated, unvaccinated, and they actually have, as many active cases as we do. What Heidi told me today is that she's working on getting the September data together. I mean, I think they have that information. Your question is there anything we can do to ask of her to provide that on a more regular basis, or is that the question?
Yeah, because it seems like I know it's busy up there, but if Delaware County, which is significantly smaller, and if they have similar rates, I would imagine if the information is there, it probably should be made available to the city.
I agree.
Good point. I'd be glad to.
Is there, I guess my question is, would it
Formally-
help to have a letter from council or?
Can't hurt.
Yeah, I
Certainly
think
can,
that's
huh?
a good idea.
Thank you.
If you want to organize that, Luke, it'd be appreciated.
Sure.
John?
Yeah, either for you or for Greg. You mentioned our water testing. Can you reinforce what that means? Where is this water coming from? And what does it indicate, this kind of an increase?
Sure. So this is wastewater testing. So at the wastewater plant on Silas Lane, which takes
Mhm.
all of the city's public sewers as well as the portion of the town that flows into the city sewers.
Okay.
We're testing the influent and sending that to the lab to be tested for COVID RNA. And that
Mhm.
tells us whether there's COVID in the wastewater and to what level. You can't translate that back to a specific number of cases upstream, but it's just an indicator of the trend in the community. So over a couple of weeks, if you see an increasing trend or decreasing or stable, that is just sort of an indicator, like Diane said, as to whether it's still something to be concerned about. Obviously it is in most recent sample shows a bit of a spike. We'll keep an eye at the next sample, which we're doing weekly samples now. So it's really just an additional indicator. It does give a little bit of a forecast. I can't say a specific number of days, but if you look at the data, it tends to be a week or so, week and a half later, you might see a case rise.
So
Of course, the cases we're comparing to are for the county as a whole, not just the city and the town's wastewater area,
Mhm.
but they do tend to correlate somewhat. So, does that answer your question?
Yeah, it's very helpful. And also, is there anything, well, for further discussion, any actions that could be instituted by government, either by a requirement or simply by communication, being part of a voice concerning people? Is there anything that we could do or should do or need to think about?
You mean specifically with respect to the
For example,
wastewater?
we did have a mask mandate for Main Street. I'm not suggesting that that's it, but anything that we as government could do to foster a vaccination or preventing contagion.
I'll certainly let Diane jump in on that, but I think in general, my opinion would be that education, continuing to get the word out and doing what
Mhm.
Diane's doing these reports, letting people know what the facts are is probably our best.
Yeah, I mean, from a public health perspective, what we heard from the people that have been working with this and developing these analyses at SUNY Upstate is that on the one hand, were we to see, like we did last spring, 0 levels, either no or non-quantifiable levels, that may be reassuring to us. And on the other side, once we see numbers trending upward, that is often predictive of cases that may increase or simply continued presence in the community. But in terms of specific changes in policy, I don't necessarily see that happening. It perhaps could in the future, but in terms of messaging for public health purposes, in terms of the importance of continued, wearing masks indoors, that is still a recommendation. We're still in high transmission. And even for those of us that are vaccinated and again, getting vaccinated. So, yeah.
And Diane, if I could add, I think that, while there's always value to us speaking as a body of local government, it shouldn't be overlooked the power that elected officials have individually, that each council member is the leader of their neighborhoods and their ward and their community, their little community. And your voice matters. So you have a following, you have email addresses, you have contacts, you have ability to speak to people one-on-one. And if you feel strongly that the message should go out, the importance of being vaccinated, or even conveying the message that Diane is communicating, because it doesn't always make it to people through the press. You play an important role individually in your own ward and neighborhoods because you are the leading elected official amongst your community. So it shouldn't be forgotten what an important role each council member plays individually.
And I would just also add that we as a county are still slightly below the national and substantially below the state average for those adults and eligible people that have been fully or partially vaccinated.
Any other questions for Dr. Jorgensen? Thank you, Diane. That was a good report. Okay, we're going to go on to board and commission reports. We only have 2 this week. First is the Commission on Community Relations and Human Rights, and that is Councilmember Murphy.
Thank you, Mayor. The entirety, so we met on Thursday, September 23rd at 7 p.m. and the entirety of our meeting was dedicated to a discussion with Acting Chief Chris Witzenberg in regards to an event that occurred over the summer with that led to the tasing of an individual on Main Street. There were a lot of really good questions had, a lot of good dialogue. And it was, I think, a very useful conversation. Like all of our commission reports, it is on YouTube, I believe. And if anyone's interested in more of the specifics, it's a pretty interesting conversation. So I'd encourage folks to watch it if you're so inclined. That was the entirety of our meeting, and I believe in a few weeks we'll be discussing our mission statement in our our mission statement as a commission.
Questions? Yes, Katie?
This is just something that occurred to me. It's really based on the agenda coming up with the discussion of the creation of a community police board. Is that the type of discussion that would then transfer sort of from the Commission on Community Relations and Human Rights to the Community Police Board? Is that sort of the idea of that body? I guess I'm just sort of trying to figure out the delineation there.
That would be my guess. There is, we do have in the, I don't have it in front of me, but the report, the clear set of duties for the new board being proposed tonight. But as that board doesn't exist right now, the commission has taken it up a lot of the complaints, and thankfully there haven't been a ton, so it's not something that comes up a lot. But that's my understanding.
Cool. Okay, thanks everybody.
Anybody else? Thank you, Luke. Our second report is Parks and Recreation. They met last night.
We
That
did.
goes to Councilmember LaFari Shu.
As always, a great time had by all. We opened with a petitioner, which was a guest from OFO, Trina Halstead, and then also Julie Dostal was at our meeting yesterday as well from LEAF. They came to educate the Parks and Rec Commission on an event that they had submitted an application for use of the large pavilion in Wilbur Park. It's distracted driving simulation and education event, and for their community, I guess you could say. And so we had some questions just around the mechanics and the safety. What did it entail? You know, there's a playground up there. It was on a Saturday afternoon. We were just trying to understand better the requested use of the space. It sounds pretty cool. This one is just like I said for their clients, but they do plan to do more of these type of things in the future. And it sounded kind of fun and also really important. So we were happy to approve that for them. We talked about events that are coming up in the parks. So the dog park ribbon cutting has been set. The opening of the dog park is going to be Tuesday the 12th, which I think is a week from today. Wow, at noon. So that's coming up quick. Mayor Herzog will be there with some remarks. We'll cut a ribbon. A lot of dogs will run around. It'll be awesome. Everyone should come and bring their dog. Lou hinted at maybe some treats. We'll see. I can't promise that for the dogs, not for the people. There is going to be, DO is hosting a harvest party on October 16th, which is in lieu of the balloon festival that they usually are able to put on because of COVID. That didn't work out. So they're doing a harvest party, which is a new event for them. But it sounds very cool. They already have a lot of sponsors and vendors and fun things. So that should be pretty fun. Everybody should check that out. That's on a Saturday, 10/16. The hot cocoa run is sponsored by the Arcot Seago. It's on a Sunday, I believe, November 7th. And then we also just got confirmation on the Festival of Lights for another year, which I know everybody's really excited about because that was a really great, I think, use of the park in winter. So that was very fun. Then we moved on. Lou gave her report. We talked about the dredging of Hodges Pond, which I've mentioned before. That is slated to begin sometime in November. They're going to basically drain the pond, remove the fish. All fish that can be removed to the mill race will be removed there. Additional fish that are too big and have outgrown the mill race evidently are going to be taken by the DEC and presumably put somewhere where they fit. So we're partnering with the DEC and SUNY Cobleskill Fisheries Department for that. And then the pond will be drained. They'll get some equipment in there and lower the bottom. And then they're also going to do some infilling away from Burgess Lauren Drive in order to potentially allow for some sidewalks there to make it more pedestrian friendly in the future. So I was really excited to hear about that. We had a little correspondence. So there were some inquiries with regard to the skate park. And Lou just responded to those by mentioning that she's beginning to start the conversation of what can be done to make improvements to that park. It is on the Neola Parks Master Plan for 2023. So that'll be something that the Parks Commission is going to continue to or begin talking about more earnestly. Scott, I followed up on your concern from last meeting, Councilmember Harrington, sorry. So with regard to softball, I got some info from Parks Director Lansing. She had mentioned that the softball league was taken over by a private party. They typically have really good participation, and in fact, it's been increasing. Last year, they didn't do it at all because of COVID, and this year, it was around March, they ended up having like 10 teams that were interested, but because things were sort of up in the air, they decided not to go through with it this year because they just weren't able to meet all the guidelines, to everyone's satisfaction to make sure that everybody was safe. So they just took another year off. She did want to point out that all but one of the softball fields is actually converted to a soccer field in the fall for the Oyama Soccer Club. So they are being used just in sort of a different way. And there's really just one that has gone unused for the last couple of years. She did mention that all field use is down with regard to like people usually, submit applications and she issues permits to use the fields. But it's across the board. She said just all kind of engagement, not only here in our community, but throughout the country really is down. So obviously, if you have any further concerns, we can continue to talk about that. But that was the info that I got on that. And I also just briefly mentioned that the Planning Commission had before them some follow-up with regard to the fence by the new basketball court in Wilbur Park. That's kind of all. The mayor gave an update on what had happened with the Planning Committee, and I'm sure we'll hear about that from Councilwoman Risberger. Lou gave us some facts on the dog park. So the large dog section is 3 acres. That all these are, estimates. I'm sure there are actuals, but she gave us kind of. So the large dog park is 3 acres. The small dog park is about 1 acre. They installed 1,700 linear feet of fence. It's a 4-foot fence. The I guess the recommended heights for fences in dog parks were between 4 and 6 feet. We went with the lower fence because we needed an awful lot of it as kind of a cost saving measure. I think that's great because I think being inside, personally being inside a 6-foot fence feels a little like tight. So I'm really happy that we went with that decision. And hopefully that will prove to be the right way to go. They installed drainage in the area and placed 85 tons of stone dust on the pathways. And then finally, we discussed the oldest tree in the park system, which is evidently in Neowah Park. It's a really cool one. If you're standing at the playgrounds and you're facing the highway, it's like directly in front of you, but just across the road. And you can see through it, which is awesome. So some conversation is going on around that because it's very old. And there's, we're of the mind, obviously, that we'd like to keep it in the park. And it's just a matter of getting enough opinions and making sure that it's safe. So that sort of investigation is ongoing. That's it. We adjourned. We got all that done in an hour.
How old is the tree?
Dave Hutchison would have to tell you. I don't know that we actually were given that information yesterday, but I imagine pretty old. It's a huge tree.
So 2 questions. Do you know what kind of tree is it? Because I'd love to go see it.
I want to say that Lou said it was an oak tree.
Okay.
Okay.
And when you said in the park system of like all of Oneonta's parks or?
Yeah, all of Oneonta's
Okay.
parks.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. Very cool. Thank you.
Questions? Len?
So the first night, did they
Yep.
set the dates?
That wasn't discussed, but I imagine that there are dates set. Yep.
And then it's a great segue for me to bring up, did we move forward with any plans for electrical? Greg?
We hired an electrical engineer to do a design for us, and we're hoping to have that as soon as we can, and hopefully be able to get phase 1 of that underway this fall. But
Cool.
hopefully from that.
Right.
The dog park finished?
Yes.
I don't believe there's anything left. I think they've completed the stone dust paths which are intended for ADA accessibility. They follow a fence around the perimeter on each section. Next year or future years, there can be more improvements made. Hopefully we'll get some water over there possibly next year. So we can have a fountain and a little spot to
That's where I
access water.
made note too, is the water for the dogs.
I believe everything is just about done. There might be some signage left to be put up. We ordered a kind of a kiosk where there'll be some postings and notices. That kind of
Mhm.
And that'll be accessible, it'll be accessible 24/7.
No.
It'll close when the park closes and opens during daylight. But it won't be locked. I don't believe.
As discussed, I think we should move a couple picnic tables over so people can sit while their dogs are running around.
I'm told that the deer really like it already. So
A 4-foot fence is easy to jump over.
yeah, definitely.
Very exciting. So show up on the 12th at noon for the ribbon cutting. If you have a dog, bring your dog. Thank you, Katie. I will say that I had the opportunity to attend both of the commission meetings this month, the Human Rights and the Parks and Rec. And when I do, I always come away impressed and appreciative of people we have on our commissions and the passion and energy that they bring to it. There's real dedication to what they do and makes a difference. Committee reports, Planning Committee, Councilmember Risberger.
Thank you. The Planning Committee met on September 27th, and we had 3 items of discussion. The first one was the Wilbur Park basketball fence. And this was a concern that came from the neighbors over the last few weeks regarding the new court after the trees were taken down on the perimeter of the park. And what they would like is some kind of visual barrier. The 3 options were a screening, which is built into the actual fence, a hedge, natural barrier, and also a stockade fence. Everybody agreed the stockade fence was not appropriate. The neighbors want a screen with possible natural barrier for down the road, so that as the natural barrier grows, you may not necessarily need the screen on the fence. So we asked the environmental board to be involved with the choice of the natural barrier. And the distance of the natural barrier would be approximately 150 feet across 3 different properties. The pricing, the screening pricing is approximately $2,300. So we're basically looking for recommendations from the environmental board on the plantings. And then they're going to discuss with Greg, and Greg's going to come up with a specific estimate that will include the plantings and the screen and bring it back to the board. Next item was the environmental board creek naming proposal. And we had 2 members of the environmental board come and discuss this. The purpose of this, I believe it's a total of 6 creeks, 4 within the city, 2 within the town. Is that right, Mark?
Sounds about right.
Yeah. And what they would like to do by naming these creeks is to encourage stewardship in the natural areas in our parks. And they wanted it to be a public process for naming these creeks. So what they're looking to do is getting the schools involved and the kids involved in class and assigning a creek, each one of these creeks that are in proximity to each one of our schools. So then they would come up with various names. The top ranked names that the schools develop will come to the council for approval. Then the names would then be referred to the U.S. Geological Society. So what they like are the names to be visually descriptive and or geographically descriptive, possibly historically significant. Eventually, once these creeks are named, they'd like to have signs put at the crossings of any street. Let's see, since 2 of the creeks travel into the town, they're going to be presenting to the Oneonta Town Board for their buy-in for this project. And they're also, the environmental board's going to be looking to contact the Susquehanna River Basin Commission about naming the tributaries to see what their feelings are about doing that. So after that, we asked the environmental board to bring forward a more detailed process to the council once they work through this. So I think this is the beginning of the process. I think it's a good thing that they've tapped into, and I look forward to seeing what they bring forward to us. And lastly, Councilmember Dreyer brought forward a concern he had and some constituents brought to him about pedestrian safety, mainly the corner of Church and Chestnut and West Street and Center and Clinton. And then Councilmember Carson brought up Chestnut and Watkins. And so let's see. Greg is going to be looking at potentially putting signs next to the crosswalks or signals at the Church Street intersection, and we'll get back to us. Or actually, Len, I think you brought up Telford as a one-way street, correct? Okay. So there was some discussion after this about Telford possibly being a one-way street, which also brought in the discussion about Potter Ave, which is currently a two-way street that is extremely narrow. So Greg is going to be adding the Telford and Potter Ave discussion to see what the possibilities are for potentially changing those to one-way streets, or to look at other options that we may have to increase safety on both those streets. So anybody have any questions about any of these 3 items? Scott?
I just have a general question. I know you guys were kicking around the idea. Is this going to be the place to bring up those type of complaints? I can't remember if the answer was yes or no.
Which complaints are you talking about?
Such as like streets, like if they should be one way or not, or general, if there's crosswalk issues or something like that to take a look at.
Well, I mean, it can come in front of the planning committee. I think ultimately what we'd be doing is looking for Greg's input and city staff's input on what choices and what options we have in this case to see what's the safest thing to do and what would potentially work. And then ultimately, I'm assuming the council would make any big decision about any change to any street.
I was just trying to think about taking some email load off of Greg, if this was the place to do it, where we could just email this committee and then they could take it up, and then that would be a streamlining the process a little bit versus like, oh.
Well,
got
I think
this
if
complaint.
you're receiving emails about a certain particular street, you could contact, if, as far as the planning committee goes, you can contact me and I'll put it on the agenda for discussion.
Okay.
And then if you want to come to the meeting and talk about what you had discussed with a constituent, that would be fine.
Okay.
And go that way. So, yes.
Yeah, just with regard to the Wilbur Park buffer, I'd just like to reiterate something that I think is really important that I've mentioned both to Greg and I think to Mark Davies, in hopes that that would make it back to the environmental board. But I'd love to see them consider and prioritize planting native shrubs or trees or whatever we end up going with. I can provide a document that has an easy list of native border plants. And it has all the details on how big they grow and their light and water requirements and things like that. I'd really like to see the city move toward anytime we do put anything into the ground, focusing on it being a native plant to the area. So I just wanted to say that again, and hopefully the environmental board, they seem like the type of folks who would like to consider that. So I figured I would put it out there.
Thanks,
Thanks.
Katie. I did share that with them, but if you want
Cool.
to share that document with me, I'll certainly get it to them as well.
I will.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Anybody else? Questions? Thank you, Katie. And actually, it was thank you.
You did a great job.
Dave,
Well, she talked to, so same items.
thank you, everybody. We go to Finance Human Resource Committee report, Councilmember Carson.
Finance Human Resource Committee met on September 27th. We had 11 items on our agenda. 9 are before you under the consent agenda. 1 is under general discussion. And the other one will be brought back to the committee next week. They all seem pretty straightforward. I'll take anybody's questions.
Oh.
You're the only one.
Okay. Yeah, so I just wondered, and I'm sorry that I didn't have an opportunity to watch the discussion at the meeting, so I'm hoping you could just reiterate for me. With regard to motion 2, the sidewalk replacement, rejecting all of the bids, something that I was really excited about was getting some sections in my ward replaced. So I just wondered, if you could fill me in on the reasoning for that.
Sure. So that's one of the 2 that didn't make it onto the consent agenda. That's under general discussion. And
Oh.
Greg, as our city administrator, is recommending that we not approve moving forward. This was developed after our meeting. During our meeting, he advised us that the bids were coming in.
Okay.
So essentially the
Do you want
bids
to talk
came
about
in.
it now or wait till the motion up to you?
I can talk about it now. And we can discuss more if you'd
Sure.
like.
Sure.
But essentially the bids came in way too high. And it's not the best time of year to be bidding. I think it might be a combination of one of the above or multiple things. Either it's not the great time of year to be bidding and there's a lot of competition that drove prices up, or I think perhaps the 2 bids that we received, they didn't fully understand the entire bid and maybe include some things that weren't intended to be in there, but we can't really tell. But ultimately, the prices are just unreasonable. And we're going to recommend rejecting the bids, and then we're going to seek to see if we can cut the scope down and get some quotes and at least get some of the work done while we still have some decent weather. And then the rest of it would be unfortunately pushed to next year to be addressed.
Okay,
So we
Just-
hope to still get something done this year.
cool. Can I ask a follow-up question? Is that okay?
Yeah.
Should I pull it? Can I ask a follow-up question or should I do it during the?
No, you can.
Okay.
As long as
Just
Greg is
out
willing
of
to
cur-
answer.
I don't know. All right. Yeah, right. Okay, noted. So just out of curiosity, like what was like the expected range of bids and what was
Somewhere in the
bid?
range of 30 to 50,000 would be expected, and I think the low bid, Jenny, correct me if I'm wrong, was 100 and.
The low bid was,
Seven.
the low bid was 148.6.
Whoa,
That's fine.
that's really high. Okay, thank you.
And understand under this sidewalk project, the city staff were going to do the prep work. So they were digging out the existing sidewalks
Oh, wow,
and they were prepping the work. This was paying masons to come in and pour the concrete.
wow.
Yeah, and the city would be purchasing the concrete as well.
On top of the bid?
So
Oh
the
my
bid is
goodness.
just to form and pour the concrete and finish it. So it was,
Yikes.
I think there was some misunderstanding perhaps.
Okay. Well, I'm certainly happy to hear that some of it is at least still on the radar. Yeah.
Okay.
Greg, so what would if this happens, if we reject this, what would the priority then be for what we're trying to do this fall? Because I know we've got areas in the city, like on River Street, where we got a huge section without a sidewalk.
Mhm.
Would that encompass that project? We've also got other areas in the city with sidewalk that's already been pulled out and we're looking to replace it. And then thirdly, we've got areas that are cracked that are still there and we haven't done anything with just yet. So what would be the priority here?
Well, the section on River Street, you're referring to where the gas main was installed.
That already paid,
That'll
that's
be
already paid
replaced by
for.
the gas, the
Okay.
company that is hired by NICEAG, so that
was
won't be part of
wondering
this project. We would prioritize the places that are missing sidewalk where it's been dug out for some reason, and then really based on safety issues, prioritize the most immediate hazards.
Okay.
Anything else that may be cracked, but not as much of an immediate concern would have to be pushed off. So.
Okay.
And then, we would have to reduce the cost down to within our bid limits or below our bid limit where we can actually be or contract somebody and get something done this year, so.
Right, and what we can get done is gonna have to be fluid because it's weather dependent.
Right.
Anybody else?
Actually, yeah, can I just ask a follow-up question to
Yeah.
Dave's?
Just joking.
With regard to the gas main replacement on River Street, is that something, do you know if they are planning to replace that sidewalk this year?
100%.
Okay, cool. All right, good.
Oh, yeah. Greg and I already had a conversation.
Oh, good.
If there are no further questions, we'll move on. Next on the agenda, city administrators report. Greg?
Okay, thanks, Gary. I'll just share a few miscellaneous updates. Our police recruits, 3 of them are in field training and their graduation scheduled for the end of this month from the academy. I hope to have the opportunity to attend. OPT and OPD, police and transit, have both reported continually that they've seen much better student behavior overall this year. It's been something noticeable. They've continually remarked on that. So I think it's important to share that. It's something nice to hear. Been a lot of respectful interactions. Our new public works director, Chris Yakabuchi, started last Thursday. He's learning fast. As I knew he would be, he's a great addition to the team, and I think he's really gonna pick things up quickly. We have several job openings. Right now, we're looking for a deputy community development director. In public works, we're looking for at least 1, possibly 2 employees, a title to be determined, equipment operator, depending on qualifications. And of course, OPT is still looking for part-time bus drivers. Although we do have a couple of full-time drivers on the agenda tonight, which is a good step. Pavement markings, I know some of you would ask about those. They're about 2/3 done. The contractor is intended to be here again next week. So we're hoping to get 100% completion before the weather is too cold. Paving this week, we're finishing some things up. Dave, the top of Elm Street by Normal Ave is scheduled to be done this week. There's another coat to go on top of that, and then Frederick Street from Reynolds to East End Ave. Just wanted to mention our working supervisor, Gene Russell. He's our buildings and grounds working supervisor. Him and his crew, and really Gene led the way. He does a lot of amazing things for us, and he replaced the tiles in front of the city hall steps, which I know have been kind of one of those miscellaneous projects that have been hanging out there for a number of years, and something that would cost a lot more if the city had to contract it out. So him and his crew just really done a nice job. I wanted to call attention to that. And then Katie stole my thunder in the dog park grand opening. Obviously, it's on the 12th, and we hope to see everybody there. So if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you, Greg. Okay, I guess I'm next on the agenda. I have two things I want to talk about today. The first is a concern. The second is something I think we can all feel pretty good about. Many of you have probably heard or read in the newspaper that the county board had authorized that Siegel County to purchase 2 ambulances and hire 21 EMS workers to begin providing ambulance EMS services throughout the entire county. The county board has approved the expenditure. The money will be spent the first year and hopefully the second year through ARPA funds. ARPA is the American Rescue Plan. What does the second A stand for? American Rescue Plan Act. Thank you. And which is the stimulus money. So there will be no cost to the county outside of the use of their stimulus funds for the first year or two. However, the county has no plan at this time on how to sustain that after the stimulus funds are no longer available, which hopefully they'll go through 2 years. So our concern is that the people of first of all, let me say that, and Chief Knapp has been, involved in the discussion on this, that the rural parts of our county have a desperate need for ambulance EMS service. I mean, there's no doubt about it. People get sick, people get injured, and there is just a lack of availability of rapid response to people, and it could cost lives. So the need is there, and it's real 100%. The concern that we have here in the city of Oneonta and in the town of Oneonta is that the people of the town and the city are already paying a very significant amount of money for professional EMS ambulance service, for which they're very appreciative, and it's of the highest quality. Our concern is that after the ARPA money is completed, that it should be clear that the service is paid for by the people who will be using the service, and that the people of the city and the town should not be taxed for something which they will not use, have no need for, and are already paying a very significant amount for. And the town supervisor and I have discussed this, and we're both on the same page on that. I've contacted, as a matter of fact, I invited the EMS director, or Robert O'Brien, the county EMS director, to come to today's meeting to talk to us about the project, both in terms of how it would operate, how it would coordinate with the Oneonta Police Department, and how it would be paid for. I also invited Victor Jones, who is the 911 coordinator, and Representative Daniel Wilbur, who is the county representative who is leading the effort. Mr. O'Brien did notify me that he could not make it tonight. He had a conflict. Mr. Jones and Mr. Wilbur did not even respond to my invitation. So unfortunately, they are not here to talk to us tonight. So what I want to say is that this is a real need. We respect that need, but we want to make sure that the county is taking steps to recognize that there are ways to pay for this without double charging people of the city of Oneonta and the town of Oneonta. One of those ways is to create an ambulance district in which it would be taxed separately from the general county tax, and you would just charge the people who are served. So we are going to continue to work closely with our 4 county representatives, with the staff at the county, to make sure that the people of the city of Oneonta and the town of Oneonta will not be charged. We think it's unfortunate that the county board passed this without any understanding or plan for how this would be paid for after the first year or two. So we'll keep you informed on that as we go forward. Questions from anybody? Dave?
I'm glad you mentioned ambulance district. I like that idea because my fear immediately was that since Oneonta is one of the biggest drivers of sales tax revenue for the county, that could potentially be put toward reducing the cost of an ambulance service throughout the county. And since we derive our sales tax revenue from the county, they take it from, I mean, you know how this works. We could potentially see that sales tax revenue drop because it's being put toward other uses, unless I'm misseeing how this is a possibility. So I like the idea of the ambulance district. I think that would protect us much more than not having anything.
Jenny was shaking her head.
Yes or no? Was that wrong?
Yeah, just a couple of concerns. One is the lack of the county board talking to their own representatives. I know in my discussions with Dan Lappin, he's asked and posed questions and they don't even get back to him. And that's very concerning because that's why we have representatives on the county board. And the county board should at least be talking to each other about this stuff. And when they don't get back to their own, that's very, very troublesome to me. The second thing is the city of Oneonta historically for years has taken and run emergency calls and graciously have done it without any payment from the county. We have sat there and sent our ambulances to several jurisdictions outside of the city and the town. We have never asked the county to reimburse us. We have taken the brunt of that in our overtime. We've taken it with the wear and tear on our vehicles. And I think the county needs to keep that in mind, that we have never asked for anything and that we've graciously done it. And I think there should be a little courtesy back our way. We haven't even gotten a thank you from the county that we've done it. I've taken calls from Mr. OBrien several times about the fact that we can't always cover a mutual aid call. And I try to explain to him that our residents of the city have to come first and the town. That's who's paying for that ambulance. So when the county jumps at something and then they're going to sit there and look at Oneonta again, I don't think this one we should remain quiet on. I think we need to push back and say, hey, for years, and when I say years, I mean years, ever since I was growing up, I can remember hearing my uncle's pager go off to come in and cover overtime as our ambulance was going to Otegel multiple times. So this is something that I think we really need to push back on and keep a good communication with the board. And we don't hear back. We just have to keep repetitive asking the same questions until they give us an answer. That's my concerns. Thank you.
So Councilmember Harrington took a lot of my thunder on that one, but just 2 points of clarity. Director O'Brien is actually in charge of 911 and Victor Jones is actually in charge of EMS. I think you had that.
Did I say it the opposite?
Yeah.
Sorry.
So just for point of clarity for record. What is I read the emails, but what is the initial plan outside of the emails for the CON? He mentioned in an email, he being O'Brien mentioned in an email that in a week or two, the CON was going to be kickstarted, the paperwork was going to be dropped in. Is that correct?
I've requested, since the county board authorized, a CON, by the way, is a certificate of need, which is something that you need issued by the State Department of Health in order to run an ambulance service. As the county board authorized the county to submit a certificate of need for the entire county, which includes the town and the city of Oneonta, I've asked to see a copy of that. And I've asked that the city have an opportunity to provide input into it as regards to the need for service within the town and the city. have not received that yet. I will continue to work through our representatives to get a copy of that, to make sure that we have input into it. We also will proceed with contacting the State Department of Health directly to provide our input if our input is not included in their application.
I was also going to bring that up. As you saw in the email, I suggested that we just directly contact DOH to talk to them about the CON. And if they're granted, I guess this question is for our legal, if they're granted the CON for the entire county and or we take them to court and we get to the ambulance district, how does that play out? That's something I personally have never researched. Is that something we should be proactive now, fighting for, that the CON is not part of the city and town of Oleana?
Municipal, again, first of all, I think we should, at least at this stage, speak in generalities rather than laying out a specific strategy. I don't think this is the venue for doing it. But municipal CONs are relatively easy to obtain, and the purpose of it is to allow a municipal entity, whether a village, a town, or county, to orient themselves to get things going. That's always for 2 years. At the end of 2 years, in order to get a permanent CON, the process is much more complicated, much more invasive, much more comprehensive. And that's simply the structure, and that's the way it's normally done. Again, I have never been involved in a situation where they've had an overlapping county CON, except for the fact of Cooperstown Medical Transport back in the day, and that's something Cooperstown Medical Transport already has a CON for all of Otsego County and all of Delaware County. So that's a situation we're already operating in. But I think that we should contact DOH. I mean, certainly we should get the input, whatever input we have at this point, and then we should make sure that DOH knows early and often that we are not happy about being included, unless there's a clear plan for funding. But in my opinion, I think doing a district is the obvious thing. Is a countywide district X town of Oleana and city of Oleana. That's really the way to do it.
So there would be two. My suggestion to you is to contact DOH directly, and our legal is also saying that. So I'd just like to stay proactive.
Early and often.
Early and often, as in yesterday.
Katie?
Yeah, I just have a financial question similar to Councilmember Risberger's, because I know that, we're going into budget and we talk a lot about the ambulance revenues being a pretty major source of revenue for the city. It's kind of a catch-22, right? Because those rural areas really need this service. But right now, as Councilmember Harrington said, we are answering those calls, and as a result, they're generating revenue for the city. Is that right? And so if there is a county countywide ambulance, is there any way to predict the impact that will have on the revenues generated by our city ambulance? My concern is that those revenues will take a hit and the residents of the city will be taxed for the ambulance service that they're not using.
Well,
Please educate me. That's what I'm asking for.
The county does not plan on providing service within the area we serve now, which is the county and with the city and the town. So that it would not really have a significant impact on our revenue from providing ambulance service. We would continue to provide all of the ambulance service that we provide within the city and the town.
Okay, right.
So there would not really be an impact upon that.
Gotcha. But with within surrounding communities, do we not?
Well, we do very little. I mean, yes, we do provide some service outside of the city and town, but those are exceptions, not the norm. The vast overwhelming majority of our revenue comes from within the city and the town. So I don't see a significant hit from that.
Gotcha.
The interesting question is, and David, you may know more about this than I do. I don't know that the county is eligible to collect insurance payments for their service as the city is.
I don't specifically know the answer to that. That's a statutory thing. I know the town and village ambulance services. Many towns, village, that's statutory in town. And so what often happens and what has been happening over the last 10 to 15 years is a municipality has been setting up not-for-profit organizations that then they contract with. It's not-for-profit organizations that run ambulance services on a LLC that gets 501c3 charitable status, and then operate an ambulance service, and they can contract with a municipality to provide the service and charge. But right now, towns and counties cannot charge, or villages and counties cannot charge for ambulance services. But I don't know about a county service. I just simply never been interested.
It's complicated.
Gotcha. I was hoping if it's appropriate, if I could hear from Jenny as well on
Sure.
her insight on the.
Sure.
Just so you know, we are doing analysis of any ambulance calls that are outside of the 13820 and the 1325, which is West Oneonta district. We're analyzing how many calls we've done over the past 5 years to come up with an estimate. That report is not finalized yet, but we are working on it.
Well, again, I want to make it clear that there is a real need for this, and we respect that. And, and I think that the county pursuing providing ambulance service to the residents of the rural parts of the county, that they should be, applauded for doing that. We just feel that they should take their time. It's complex, do it right, make sure that the people who need the service and will use the service are the ones who are charged for it, not the people who will not receive the service, which would be people in the town and city. And I am, as I said before, I was surprised and disappointed that both Victor Jones and Dan Wilbur did not acknowledge my invitation to come and speak to the council tonight. On a more positive note, I think that we've spoken in the last couple of weeks about the fact that the city had applied for a grant to NYSERDA for a feasibility study to look at a downtown geothermal or heat pump district. The purpose would be to have a number of our downtown buildings served by a common geothermal or heat pump system, which would be more cost effective than having each individual existing building build their own system. And that's an exciting step forward, but even more exciting is that here within the city, we have now had 3 awards in addition to the award that the city has received for a downtown feasibility study of a downtown geothermal system. Otsego now received an award for feasibility study of a similar district geothermal heat pump system at the Oneonta Rail Yard. So they are looking at a study for being able to provide heat and cooling for up to 177,000 square feet of new light industrial space, which would consist of a combination of fabricating and assembly space, storage and loading dock space, and office space. They will also at the same time look at the implications of inviting some of the few nearby commercial industrial buildings around the rail yard to be able to join that district. So that's also very exciting. We had a lot of people express their concerns about increasing the use of fossil fuels in the development of the rail yard. So this is an exciting step forward. So I want to thank the IDA, Otsego Now, for pursuing this, and thank NYSERDA for awarding this grant to them. In addition to that, SUNY Oneonta received an award to do a similar study for a district-style heat pump system to serve 29 of their buildings on campus. Buildings that are currently heated by fossil fuels through steam and hot water. This would cover approximately 1.9 million square feet of space on campus. So NYSERDA tells us that the city of Oneonta, for a community this size, has been the most aggressive of any community in the state in applying for and receiving awards on moving forward with this. So it's good to hear. It says a lot about Oneonta being forward-thinking in these crucial times of climate change. And there's no guarantee something positive will come of this, but you have to take a first step. And the city is taking that. And I thank SUNY Oneonta and Otsego Now for joining us in that and really setting the state. NYSERDA has recognized Oneonta, the city of Oneonta, as a community that's moving forward. And that's all I've got. Probably enough. Okay, now we've got, before we go to the consent agenda, we have two motions that are not on the consent agenda. I put them first this time instead of last. The first is regards a resolution to approve the implementation plan for the Community Advisory Board's plan for reform and reinvention of the Oneonta Police Department. I'll read through the motion and we'll go from there. Whereas on June 12, 2020, Governor Andrew Cuomo signed Executive Order 203, requiring each local government in New York State to convene stakeholders for a fact-based and honest dialogue about the public safety needs of their community, and to adopt a policing reform plan by April 1, 2021. And whereas the Common Council of the City of Oneonta on August 4th, 2020, appointed representatives of the Oneonta NAACP, Hartford College, SUNY Oneonta, the Oneonta Commission on Community Relations and Human Rights, the Common Council, and the City Personnel Director to serve as a community advisory board in collaboration with the Oneonta Police Department in developing a plan for policing reform. And whereas members of the Community Advisory Board held numerous public meetings, 2 public hearings, and solicited active involvement from dozens of citizens. And whereas the Common Council on April 1, 2021, approved and adopted the Community Advisory Board's plan for police reform and reinvention. And whereas Mayor Gary Herzig subsequently appointed a committee of council members to develop a detailed plan to implement the adopted plan for police reform and reinvention. And whereas the appointed committee developed such an implementation plan through open meetings and public hearings. Therefore, now be it resolved that the Common Council of the City of Oneonta approves and adopts the implementation plan for police reform and reinvention as presented with the creation of a community police board pursuant. Let me just clarify that. This is approving the plan for implementation with the understanding that the creation of the community police board, which is part of the plan, will be pursuant to the council's formal creation of such a board through the approval of a city ordinance. I'll entertain a motion to approve. Councilmember Dreyer, do I have a second? Councilmember Murphy. Before I open it to discussion, I just want to take a minute to thank the members of the committee that was appointed. It was led by Councilmember Dreyer. Also on the committee was Councilmember Murphy, Councilmember Risberger, Councilmember Carson. They worked for, I think, close to 6 months, meeting every other week. And all the meetings were public. When we couldn't have in-person meetings, they were all televised, live streamed, I should say, I'm showing my age, on YouTube. And they still live there now, so they can be watched at any time. And then they were held in person. They held public hearings on it. And I think what was also impressive is that the board voted on every one of the steps for implementation that are in the plan. And my understanding is that all 4 members of the board voted unanimously to approve every step in the plan. So I want to thank the members of the board for their work on that. I'll open it up to discussion. Anybody? Councilmember Carson.
So just some points of clarity. Under the second whereas, I believe the Community Advisory Board or CAB is actually CABRIC, is what we titled it as. Is that correct?
No, the
That was
Community
our
Advisory Board
review
was
committee
the
was-
original board that you appointed. I just referred to the committee that was appointed to create an implementation plan.
So you're referring to in the third whereas to the CAB, not the CABRIC.
Correct.
Which then goes over to the fourth whereas. To the CAB. And then it was a draft plan for the police reform and reinvention that we approved that night.
I'm having trouble counting whereas because there are two
Yeah,
different
the
pages.
second page of our agenda, the first whereas.
Yeah.
It was a draft plan is what we approved.
No, on April 1st, that was not, you didn't approve a draft plan. You approved a final plan as presented by the Community Advisory Board. However, because the plan needed additional research for implementation, I asked that I appointed four council members to form a committee to create an implementation plan of the plan that was adopted, that was developed by the Community Advisory Board.
Right, and that's where I was going to be asking for the identification of that the implementation plan is actually through CABRIC, not referenced through CAB. And so I'm just trying to get some clarity because even as I read this today, I'm still looking at it going, "Ooh, where was the authoring of CABRIC in the implementation plan?" Because we approved a draft recommendations for the police reform and reinvention. That's what we approved in April of this year.
No, it was not a draft in April. That was a final plan. That was not a draft. That was not a draft.
I remember making the friendly amendment. Thank you.
It was not a draft. I can tell you it's not a draft because we were required by the state to submit, to adopt a final plan
Right.
no later than April 1st, which is what we did.
I remember it being as a draft, but maybe the clerk could clarify it. But then as I get down to be it resolved, which is the meat and potatoes of this motion, is the title of the document, as I read this, is all implementation plan because the I, the P are capitalized. It feels like that's the name of the document. Is that how you read it?
Correct. The plan, the police reform and reinvention plan was presented to us, developed by and presented to us by the Community Advisory. The council approved the plan for police reform and reinvention. However, it did not have sufficient details for implementation. So I asked the committee to create an implementation plan of the recommendations that were created by the plan for police reform and reinvention. So what you have in front of you today to approve is an implementation plan for the recommendations that were developed as part of the police reform and reinvention plan previously approved by the Community Advisory Board.
I guess I got to go on record that we spent 6 months, give or take. We, the CABRIC, the Community Advisory Board Review Committee, spent a serious amount of time coming up with an implementation plan. Whereas in this motion, I don't see any acknowledgement of that committee that you put together that came up with the actual implementation plan. I'm just trying to follow the motion, that's all.
Can I add to this? Len, under the second whereas, talking about appointing a committee of council members to develop a detailed plan to implement that. I mean, would it make you feel better if it said to develop an implementation
Well, it's on the
plan?
next one. continuing down from where Dave says.
Oh,
the
yeah, the
next one,
appointed committee.
Whereas the appointed committee, which is referred to above as the committee that I appointed to develop an information plan. Whereas the appointed committee developed such an implementation plan through open meetings and public hearings. Therefore, be it resolved that the council approves and adopts the implementation plan.
But without the acknowledgement of CABRIC within this motion, one would read this motion as the appointed committee is the CAB. And it wasn't the CAB that actually did that implementation plan, it was the CABRIC.
Well,
Would you like to add the letters CABRIC to it? If to the motion, that would be fine.
To the
If you
third.
read it, I don't read it that way, but if you do, and you'd feel better adding the letters CABRIC to it, that would be fine.
I'd like to make a friendly motion to amendment to the third whereas on page.
Instead of saying the appointed committee, whereas the Community Advisory Board Review Committee, instead of appointed committee, develop such an implementation plan.
No, I would rather say whereas the appointed committee, comma, CABRIC,
Okay,
Community Advisory Board Review Committee, develop such an implementation plan through open meetings and public hearings therefore.
okay. So let me just, we'll get to you in a second, Katie.
Sure.
So let me just clarify. Whereas the appointed committee, comma, CABRIC, and I don't think we should call it CABRIC because nobody will know what that means. So we should spell it out, Community Advisory Board Review Committee.
Correct.
Develop, comma, develop such an implementation plan through open meetings and public hearings. Is that correct? Does anybody have any objections to that change? Katie?
I was just gonna suggest that we put it in the sentence before that, but I am not married to that enough to continue this conversation.
You can
So
put it
as
in
long as
both, you can put it in both sentences if
As
you
long as
want.
Councilmember Carson is happy, that's fine.
Okay. So, so now we have a motion on the floor to approve, we have a first and a second to approve the motion, which has now been revised, where the third whereas on page 2 reads, whereas the appointed committee, comma, Community Advisory Board Review Committee, comma, develop such an implementation plan through open meetings and public hearings, therefore. Further discussion? John?
Yeah, just looking forward and actually reflecting on one of the comments that came from the attendees. I'm planning to support this, but part of my mind was there's a lot more detail that would have to be put on things. Although this is a plan, it's not a commitment in great detail. For example, pretext traffic stops. And the notion behind that, I think, is that pretexts or false assumptions, wanting to do one thing but doing it on the basis of a cracked taillight is something we don't want to see. And at some point, we're going to need to hear what that means. What are we saying with that? Some cities, for example, are eliminating traffic stops for no brake lights or other kinds of problems, saying, you know what, there's just been too much going on, so we're not going to do that. On the other hand, there's this notion of safety on the roads, and part of it, the police have sometimes been charged with looking for people who are driving either intentionally or unintentionally without things. So we'll have to sort that out. And if there was a remark made perhaps in the heat of a moment or something saying, I will find a way around that, I think what it means is I want clarification about what I am going to do. And I'm not sure we're in a position yet to say, we just want to stop all traffic stops for conditions like that. if I was on Main Street the other day, and there were a number of vehicles going by that were getting very loud in front of the gathering. And whether or not people were, I was hearing speculation that they're here to disrupt this meeting. And I was really saying, a lot of motorcyclists like to come up to this area and ride on a sunny day. So what to do? And when you say accept the meeting, I'm assuming that we're going to do more discussion about what these details, what kind of details we'll put into that, so we understand what we're going to be doing, and making it possible for a discussion between the police, et cetera, about what kind of constraints this might put them under and that sort of thing. So I just wanted to get that off my chest, because I want to accept this, but I also think there's a lot more work with each one of the recommendations. It will have to be done in council about what it specifically means, and it's not a signed, sealed, and delivered deal, so to speak, on something.
Thank you. Any further discussion?
Yeah,
Councilmember Murphy?
Yes, John, just to kind of address your concern, we did have a very long and lengthy discussion about pretext stops. And the biggest concern there was just, again, not pointing fingers at OPD, but other departments have had a history of using pretext stops for a variety of reasons. So what we agreed upon, and I believe the exact language escapes me, but was to ask, well, to mandate OPD not to do pretext stops based on certain conditions such as race, socioeconomic
I
conditions.
absolutely understand that.
Okay.
I can extrapolate besides traffic stops, the way people who might be unwelcome to some people in the population might be sitting on a step that if I was sitting there, I'd be possibly doing something illegal, but I would not be approached by the police on that. So that question of what a pretext stop is, or what intervening on a person sitting in Mueller Plaza might mean, is something that will have to get clarified and discussed. By what do we mean by this? And if the police have an issue about what that means, perhaps they do, or perhaps they don't, that they have an opportunity to say, this is what we're trying to do. Whether, if you're saying, I'm going to find some way to go after a minority,
Okay.
no matter what you say, I'll figure out something. That's wrong.
Yeah.
But if it is opening a door that anytime you deal with something like this, don't bother doing that anymore. Don't stop cars because their mufflers are making too much, they're falling off, or their brake lights are broken, and that sort of thing. Cities are doing that now. They're saying, no, we just will not stop cars any longer for minor infractions. But that minor infraction might lead to a traffic accident and even a death later on if that condition persists. And we got to sort that out, perhaps. Maybe it's all well understood, but I'm not sure from what was related that it is mutually understood by the people who enforce these things and the people who are thinking about it.
Councilmember Harrington?
I would just like to thank everybody for their time on this. I know it's been a long process, and I know I couldn't make the meeting where we submitted our questions, and I did watch it on YouTube going in between things that I was doing, and so that was very helpful. And thanks for Councilmember Drennick for reaching out to make sure all my questions were answered. I really did appreciate that. I don't see anything in here that's going to really hold me up on voting no for this. I'm going to support it. I talked to the soon-to-be police chief officially, hopefully here soon, and talked to him in a long conversation about it. And I think our residents can feel real comfortable with what we're trying to accomplish here. And I just wanted to say thanks. I think it's, like I said, it's a long process, but it's, it's uncomfortable, I think, for a lot of people but sometimes uncomfortable is what we need.
Councilmember Risberger?
Yeah, just going back to the discussion about the pretext stops, we had long discussions about that as a group with the lieutenant. And I came out of that discussion feeling satisfied with what I was hearing and felt confident about what I was hearing and changes that were going to happen. What John is bringing up is a little bit, has piqued my interest a little bit as far as other cities that are no longer stopping traffic for any traffic infraction. So I was hoping John could expand on that a little bit and let us know what cities are doing that. So we could potentially look at what policies those cities have adopted and look to see if that's something that we need to be concerned about.
That's perfectly fine,
So
as long as that doing further research and inquiry about what that means here it would be good to do, that we're not doing a blanket acceptance of this without a consideration of what the details or what are the issues here. In terms of naming the specific cities, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to remember how to get home tonight. So
you don't have the names? You don't have the names of the cities?
Oh, I have clear recollection that some cities, and if you find that I'm lying about that by following the facts, but some cities, it's been on news about cities deciding not to do traffic stops because it's just not a good idea. And that's, I don't have the cities to name.
City of Minneapolis, Minnesota.
Thanks for that. Better memory than mine.
Better internet than you.
Councilmember Drennick?
So the community police board will be integral to seeing that all of these recommendations are not only being pursued, but hit various benchmarks toward the goals that we've identified here. If they determine through the collection of data, surveys, and community input, that they have a suggestion to make to council for our actions and our discussion, it'll run through our city administrator. We'll bring it to council. We'll have that discussion. And then the community advisory board will be either engaged further, or the police department will be engaged further, or we'll end right there.
Any further discussion? If there's none, would you please call the vote?
Councilmember Murphy,
Aye.
Councilmember Davies,
Yes.
Councilmember Risberger,
yes.
Councilmember LaParishu. Aye. Councilmember Carson,
Yes.
Councilmember Harrington,
Yes.
Councilmember Rafter,
Yes.
Councilmember Drennan.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimous. Again, I think that this is an important step forward. I think it's a plan for real policing reform. And there's meaningful reform in it. And like I've said before, there will be many people who say it's gone too far. There will be many people who say it hasn't gone far enough. Everybody has different perspectives and different life experiences, but there is real reform in it. And again, I want to thank the members of the Community Advisory Board. I want to thank all of the volunteers that devoted their time, such as Daniel, who was an appointed member, but devoted many hours to it. Thank the members of the CABRIC who developed a plan to implement the original advisory board's plan for reform. A lot of people worked on this. It's been a year's process. It started, the original board was appointed just about a year ago, or more than a year ago. We started, the board started meeting about a year ago. They were appointed earlier than that. So well done. Okay, motion 2. Motion that consistent with the recommendation of the city administrator and the purchasing agent, the common council approves rejecting all submissions which were received in response to the city's advertisement for 2021 sidewalk replacement, various locations, contract 2021-G-007. All bids will be rejected as the bid amounts far exceeded the adopted budget, and it has been determined to not be in the best interests of the city to make an award. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Councilmember Harrington, second by Councilmember Carson. Discussion? Any further discussion? We had some discussion earlier. If not, please call the vote.
Councilmember Murphy.
Aye.
Councilmember Davies.
Yes.
Councilmember Ritzberger.
Yes.
Councilmember Lepari Shu.
Aye.
Councilmember Carson.
Yes.
Councilmember Harrington.
Yes.
Councilmember Raptor.
Yes.
Councilmember Drennick.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. So now we'll go to the consent agenda, which consists of motions 3 through 11. I'll read through and you'll let me know if any council member wants any of those motions removed, so they can be discussed individually. Motion 3. Motion that the council approves the minutes of the regular meeting, which was held on September 21, 2021. 4, motion that the council approves the warrants, which total $598,587.91. And the same should be placed on the Director of Finance's desk for payment as presented. 5, motion that the council appoints Stephen Yeager to the position of full-time bus driver at a base annual salary, excuse me, of $30,517, which is a CSEA grade 4. This would be effective October 6th, 2021, subject to the satisfaction of all applicable civil service requirements. 6, motion that the council appoints Roger Chase to the position of full-time bus driver at an base annual salary of $30,517. Also effective October 6, 2021, subject to the satisfaction of all applicable civil service requirements. 7, motion that the Common Council appoints Christopher Witzenberg to the position of police chief at a base annual salary of $95,000. That's a PS4 in our administrative salary schedule. This would be effective October 6th, 2021, and it would be subject to the satisfaction of all applicable civil service requirements. 7, I'm sorry, that was 7. 8, motion that the council adopts revisions to the OPT, Oneonta Public Transit sign-on bonus policy to be effective October 6th, 2021, as presented. The council further authorizes the mayor to execute a memorandum of agreement with the CSEA, Local 1000, AFS-CME, AFL-CIO, City of Oneonta Unit 8101, adopting and implementing said policy. 9, motion that the council adopts the part-time employee professional development and training policy, which would become effective October 6, 2021, as presented. 10, motion that the council authorizes the mayor to enter into a renewal 3-year contract with the town of Oneonta, subject to review by the city attorney, for the city's continued provision of Oneonta Public Transit services within the town for the period of January 1, 2022 through December 31, 2024, for $15,000 for 2022, $16,000 for 2023, and $17,000 for 2024. And 11, motion that as a result of competitive bids, which were solicited and accepted for the West Street pressure reducing valves replacement project, the council approves the engineering staff and purchasing agent's recommendation to award the bid to the lowest responsive qualified bidder, which was RB Robinson Contracting Incorporated of Candor, New York, in the amount of $78,768. And the council further authorizes the necessary budget transfers within the water fund account codes. That concludes the consent agenda. Does anybody have any requests to remove any of the items? Councilman Carson?
7.
7. Any others? Hearing no others, I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda minus item 7. Councilmember Risberger makes the motion. Councilmember Davies second. Would you please call the vote?
Councilmember Murphy,
Aye.
Councilmember Davies.
Yes.
Councilmember Risberger,
Yes.
Councilmember Lepari Shu.
Aye.
Councilmember Carson,
Yes.
Councilmember Harrington.
Yes.
Councilmember Rafter,
Yes.
Councilmember Drennick.
Aye.
Consent agenda passes unanimously. Thank you. We now go to motion 7 with regards to the appointment of Christopher Witzenberg, position of police chief. Do I have a motion to approve? Councilmember Harrington, second by Councilmember Carson. Discussion.
So I move this motion to just bring it to the public that I highly recommend, along with, I heard at least 2 others in the public concession tonight saying that they strongly recommend Chris Witzenberg to the position of police chief for the City of Oneonta Police Department. I too have known Chris for a few decades or a couple of decades plus. Chris has always conducted himself in a completely professional manner. There's little innuities that I've noticed of Chris that he looks out for his staff no matter what level that he was at. And I'm excited to see him as he takes over officially in this capacity to what he can do with the department in a progressive manner. I also was very satisfied with how he conducted himself with the relationship to our CABRIC meetings. He was very genuine. He was very forthright, and the depth of knowledge that he has within his profession is pretty impressive. So I strongly recommend that we hire Chris Witzenberg to the position of police chief for the City of Oneonta Police Department.
Any further discussion? Councilmember Murphy?
Yeah, I would like to second everything Councilmember Carson said. Chris has been great through much of this progress. However, I would like to ask this council to table this motion until we get a chance to talk to Lieutenant Witzenberg about statements he said during the cab process. Like I said, I do believe Chris is very much so dedicated to this city and serving the city. But comments made in that meeting were concerning to me regarding this council's authority and questions there of it.
So am I hearing a motion to table coming from Councilmember Murphy?
Correct. Until we get a chance, until members of this council have a chance to talk to Lieutenant Witzenberg about his statements.
Do I have a second?
I would second that, mainly because I had a couple questions. I expected the lieutenant to be here tonight. I'm not sure why he's not.
When you say you would second it, does that mean you are seconding?
I would second, yes, I second it.
So I have a motion to table by Councilmember Murphy. I have a second by Councilmember Risberger. I'm now going to ask the clerk to call a vote. You are voting yes to table it, no, not to table it, and proceed with the original motion. Please call a vote.
Councilmember Murphy,
Aye.
Councilmember Davies,
Yes.
Councilmember Risberger,
Yes.
Councilmember Lepari Shu,
Yes.
Councilmember Carson,
No.
Councilmember Harrington,
No.
Councilmember Rafter,
No.
Councilmember Drennick.
No.
Okay, the motion to table it does not pass. We need 5 votes for it to pass. There were only 4 votes, so the motion to table it fails. So now we go back to any further discussion on the original motion. Councilman Risberger.
First of all, I would second everything that's been said about Lieutenant Witzenberg. I've done many ride-alongs with him. I think he's nothing less than a professional. But the main question I had, and he and I have discussed this in the past, was mainly the social media account of OPD. And the last few months, it's been fantastic. I know years ago, the Facebook account, nobody was allowed to put comments on, or if they did, they were immediately erased. Then we went through a period of time where comments suddenly were allowed back on. And then fast forward to today, where everybody that's paying attention to the news cycle knows what's going on with Facebook and what's come out about Facebook and their own research that's done about people, the social commentary and social problems that have come through Facebook is just magnified. And so I tonight went through the Facebook account and there was absolutely nothing. Everything was great until I went all the way back to, I took a snapshot of it, August 9th. And this was actually your COVID update that was posted on that site. It registered 296 comments, 271 shares, which I think the shares are fine. But I went through the comments before the council meeting and it was this escalation of just arguing and shouting at each other. And so my question for the lieutenant was what his plan was going forward with the social media account. And is our plan for something like this to really limit that interaction directly on the page and prevent people from going at each other? Because I don't think it's helpful for our community at all.
It is my understanding, and somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, that if you have a page as opposed to a individual profile, which the police department has, you cannot you cannot block comments to posts. Carrie, is that correct?
It's considered censorship.
So if you have a public page, you cannot limit comments to it. You cannot block comments. If you have your own personal profile, you can block people from commenting on it, but a public page cannot.
Well, I think it's disappointing.
I can tell you personally, I have a page and I get a lot of comments that I would rather not get, but that's public life.
Right, but with the police department, you'd like to think that they're above all politics and everything, and they're a neutral body. And when they post information that's for the good of the community, and what it does is just brings these two opposite sides like a magnet at each other and at each other's throats. Like, I don't think it helps the community at all. And there's got to be a way around that for the police department to try to avoid that. And I'd at least like a commitment from him, if we're going to hire him, to try to make that situation better.
But I don't think you can because it falls underneath censorship. So
So we just throw up our hands and not do anything?
You can take,
I don't.
you can take away the page.
I don't agree with
That's the only way
that.
you're gonna be able to do is take away the page.
Let's not get back and forth. Let's have individual comments. I mean, Councilman Whisper has made his comment. Would you like to?
I don't think that has a bearing on whether he should be hired or not, because you're talking about something that's out of his control. You can't limit what people are gonna post on there. I agree with you, Dave. I don't like it that they use that as the form to fight back and forth. But they are maintaining their neutrality when they don't respond to it. Hey, we posted the information. You guys want to fight it out? We don't agree with it, but we're not going to sit there and censor anybody because both sides have an equal say, whether we like it or not. I mean, I don't know how you get around that. That's just my opinion.
Except what they're doing is they're providing the boxing ring. So I understand that your point of view. I don't believe that though. There's got to be some way around it.
Any further discussion from anybody?
Yep.
Katie?
I just wanted to say that, ultimately I supported the table because just anytime that we've gone to make an appointment and there's been a question that we would like to have answered or some uncertainty around any issue, just for consistency's sake, I've always said, let's find out more if we can before we move forward. But I think that ultimately in the room, there's a lot of support for Lieutenant Witzenberg to become the chief, myself included. And I think that, we can go forward with this appointment, and still I would encourage those that have questions to reach out and communicate with the chief. It's not as though we appoint him to this position and he just goes off like into the sunset and does whatever he wants. There's a relationship with this board and a responsibility between both parties to be transparent about the things that are important to us. And so I would just encourage anyone who has any, the doubt is not about his qualification for the position. It's about the way that he will conduct himself in the position. If you don't think that that precludes him from the position, then that conversation can absolutely happen after the fact. And so I would just encourage you guys to bring that up to him. And I would hope that he would be open to it. It sounds from his past experience that he has been. So that's all I want to say.
Anybody else further discussion? Please call the vote.
Councilmember Murphy.
Present. Or abstain.
Voting.
Abstain.
Councilmember Davies.
Yes.
Councilmember Risberger.
Yes.
Councilmember Lepari.
Aye.
Councilmember Carson.
Yes.
Councilmember Harrington.
Yes.
Councilmember Rafter.
Yes.
Councilmember Drennan.
Aye.
Motion passes. Effective tomorrow, Chris Witzenberg is our police chief.
Yay.
Yeah.
Okay. Under additional business, let me start with, we have a 30-day advance notice to for the application of a license to serve liquor, wine, beer, and cider by Social Eats Project 607, 546 Main Street. And this is we can waive the 30-day notice requirement for us to comment on it. And what I will ask is, does anybody object to the city waiving a 30-day requirement for comment by the municipality?
Gary, I just have a question.
Yes.
Is this correct? It says to obtain a renewed license to serve?
That's my error. I copied an old additional business and I failed to remove it.
Gotcha.
I apologize.
You don't have to. I just caught that.
I guess just for the record, could I make a friendly amendment to remove the word renewed to just license?
It's not a motion, though.
Then it's not, never mind, take it back.
We like the fact that you're friendly. So I'm hearing no objections, so therefore we will notify the State Liquor Authority that we are waiving a 30-day opportunity to comment, and they can proceed with with processing the application. Any other items amongst council members for discussion? Councilmember Lepari.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I've mentioned a couple times the Future Liliana Foundation Properties of Merit. Voting has concluded and the winners were announced. I wanted to just congratulate 2 Fourth Ward properties were awarded top prizes in their categories, 89 Elm Street and 41 Elm Street. I'm just excited to have 2 properties of merit in my ward. And if anybody is interested in seeing the full list of winners or wants any more information, you can search for FOF Properties of Merit on Facebook or go to fofpropertiesofmerit.blogspot.com.
Anybody else, anything? Councilmember Murphy.
I would just like to formally congratulate our new police chief and look forward to working with him.
Risberger.
Just because we had the discussion on the record, I think I should bring this up. As far as Minneapolis, Minnesota goes, as far as they're pulling people over, the statement is they will no longer be able to pull cars over for low-level violations. So like air fresheners, expired license plates, unless that's been removed due to overwhelmingly large issues with their driver's license, like DUI or things like that. So It's not that they're not pulling anybody over anymore.
Whoever thought we'd live in a world where people would be able to correct you every time you say something that isn't accurate? Amazing.
And then since you were consulting that, I found the other cities, Philadelphia, Portland, the entire state of Connecticut, Iowa, and that's when I just stopped.
Any other items for discussion? Okay. Correspondence, actually, I received a letter today, Terry, which I'll ask you to read. It is from Ms. Shelp's fifth grade class at Valley View Elementary School.
Dear Mr. Herzig, we have seen a lot of litter around our city, Oneonta. The litter we have seen include bottles, cans, cups, wrappers, broken glass, masks, cigarettes, takeout food containers, and plastic bags. Unfortunately, this litter is at our playgrounds, outside of residential homes, around college campuses, along highways, and right next to trash disposals. This is unacceptable behavior because you could use these garbage cans to put trash in. Our solutions to this problem are to share it in the local newspaper, impose hefty fines, and/or show our concern on TV. Please take our concerns seriously. Thank you for your time and cooperation. Sincerely, Ms. Shelp's fifth grade class. And they've all initialed it.
And so I asked Terry to read that because it asks that we share it in the local newspaper. We just happen to have two reporters from our local newspapers here. So I challenge you to cover it on behalf of Ms. Shelp's fifth grade class.
Can I just tack on to that? They're definitely right. I've noticed a lot of litter in our community this fall. And one of the things that SUNY Oneonta is doing in order to help mitigate that is they're having a community cleanup day. The info on that was emailed to all the common council members. If you didn't get it, let me know because things have been weirdly going to my spam. And so maybe that's the case for you too, but there's a community cleanup that's organized by Linda Drake from SUNY Oneonta. It's taking place on October 17th at 12:30. The Office of External Affairs and the Center for Social Responsibility and Community are looking for volunteers. They're going to begin, I think they're going to meet at Muller Plaza at 12:30 and then collect litter around the neighborhoods until 4 o'clock. So anyone's welcome to join. I confirmed that with her today. I think that, yeah, this, despite, this year, the better behavior by students, I think we are seeing a lot more litter and trash and garbage just everywhere. I'm noticing it out on my walks, and it's a great opportunity to not only rectify that, but to also connect with the student community as they do their part to try to make it a little bit better as well.
Send that to me.
Sure.
Councilmember Murphy.
I would just like to thank Ms. Schultz's class. Sadly, students, particularly that age, are not responsible for all the ills in the world, and sadly, they're the ones that are going to have to deal with the problems left behind by them for future generations. So we do owe it to them to help do our part to clean up.
And kudos to that civic engagement to write
Absolutely.
a letter to
Absolutely.
mayor. That's awesome.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
could we maybe formulate a letter back as a council and with you, or have you, even off of your letterhead, you sign it, we can all sign it, that we received it, we are taking it serious, and it's nice to see, no matter what age, to get involved. I just think that,
I will, I was planning on responding, so I will be happy to circulate it for signature amongst council members.
thank you.
Yes, Scott. I'm Scott. Councilmember Carson.
Thank you. I would just like to recognize and say thank you to the Parisian Pit Run Committee. They did another outstanding event this year. That is their 28th. I think, Mike, you did it for the first 20. He was on the committee. So it's those volunteers, community members that volunteer their time to take such a worthy event. I know money has been donated on behalf of the Parisian Fund for young people in their formal education. So I think it's worthy of us to recognize in this meeting. that after 28 years, Ricky is not forgotten.
Any other items for discussion? Oh, we're on correspondence for past discussion. Any other, do you have any other correspondence?
No.
Okay. The only thing left is executive session. I'm not aware of any. So with that, I think